When you sit alone in a house you've shared with someone for 37 years, the silence becomes especially loud. Every creak of a floorboard, every sound of a ticking clock echoes. I'm used to waking up in the morning to an empty bed, but habit doesn't make loneliness any less painful. My name is Yul Havland. I'm 68 years old, and for the past 2 years, I've been living alone in my and Vivian's home in Lompoc, California, a small town where everyone knows each other and where secrets are especially hard to keep. But I have a secret that I keep very carefully. It's Sunday, and as usual, I'm sitting on the veranda with a cup of black coffee, watching the neighborhood kids play outside. Vivian loves Sundays. She would make blueberry pancakes, and we would have breakfast on this very veranda, discussing plans for the week or just enjoying the morning chill. Vivian died of pancreatic cancer. We were diagnosed too late, when there was nothing that could be done. 6 months of agony that I'd rather forget, but I can't. I remember every detail, every minute spent in the hospital, every conversation with doctors who said the same thing. We're doing everything we can, Mr. Havlin. After Vivian died, our son Roscoe came every week, checking on how I was doing, helping with chores around the house. This went on for about 3 months until he met Lynette Boggs, a beautiful woman with long red hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. I immediately sensed something amiss, but Roscoe was spellbound. Lynette is 12 years younger than my son. She's 32, he's 44. Not a fatal difference, but enough to make a father wonder about the motives of a young woman showing interest in a middle-aged divorced man with a stable, though not outstanding, financial situation. Roscoe is a good man, but has always been a bit naive. He inherited Vivian's gentleness, her kindness, and trustworthiness. Unlike me, he always sees the best in people. I've been a geology professor at a community college for 35 years, and I've seen enough to be a cynic, or, as I prefer to think of it, a realist. They were married 6 months after they met. Too soon, in my opinion. I tried to tell Roscoe to wait, to get to know the person you were going to marry, but he wouldn't listen. "Dad, I'm 44, he said then. "I'm not a kid. I know what I'm doing." At the wedding, I smiled and toasted to the happiness of the newlyweds, but inside I felt anxious. Something about Lynette seemed calculating. I noticed how her expression changed when she thought no one was looking at her. The way her smile disappeared, giving way to a cold, assessing stare. After the wedding, Roscoe started coming less often. First once every 2 weeks, then once a month, and now we only see each other on holidays or special occasions. Lynette always finds a reason why they can't stay longer. Work, meetings, commitments. She works as a receptionist at a dental practice. And from what she says, the whole practice would fall apart without her. The last time they visited was Thanksgiving, an awkward dinner filled with fake smiles and superficial conversations. Lynette asked how I was doing financially. "You can't do much on a teacher's pension," she said, looking around the living room. "It's a big house, and the bills must be pretty big too." "I manage," I said briefly. Vivian and I had always lived within our means and saved. I noticed something flicker in her eyes. Was it interest? Doubt? Greed? It's hard to tell. "If you need help, Dad," Roscoe interjected, "you just say the word. We're always—" "Of course," Lynette interrupted, putting her hand on his knee. "Families should support each other." I almost laughed. Family. Lynette used the word like it meant something to her, but I could see her looking at our house, at the old furniture, at the worn rug in the living room. Pity? No, more like disappointment. Like she was expecting something more precious. If only she'd known. Vivian wasn't just my wife and the mother of our son. She was a genius, a brilliant mind that preferred to remain in the shadows. With a degree in chemical engineering from Berkeley, she could have had a distinguished career. Instead, she chose her family, me and Roscoe. But she never stopped working, experimenting. In a small home laboratory set up in the garage, she did research that only I knew about. And even I didn't always understand her work. "You don't have to worry, Yule," she'd say, when I asked about her experiments. "It's just a hobby, a way not to lose skills, but it was more than a hobby, much more than that." A month before she was diagnosed, Vivian had patented a unique water purification technology. Efficient, cheap, revolutionary. She'd been working on it for nearly a decade, perfecting every detail. "This could change the world, Yule," she told me one evening as we sat in the backyard watching the sunset. "Imagine, Clean water for everyone, even in the poorest regions. I remember how proud I was of her at that moment. My Vivian, always thinking of others. When it became clear that she was dying, Vivian made a difficult decision. She sold her patent to a large corporation, not for ideals, not to change the world, but to provide for Roscoe and me after she was gone. $14 million, a sum that still seems unreal to me. Take care of Roscoe, she told me one of the last days. He's a good boy, but he's too trusting, like I used to be. I made a promise, and I'll keep that promise, even if Roscoe doesn't understand my actions, even if he hates me for them. After Vivian died, I didn't tell anyone about the money. Not Roscoe, not his new wife, not my friends, not my neighbors. I went on with my life as I had before, in the same house with the same furniture, driving the same old 2,000-year-old Toyota. I went to the same supermarket, bought groceries on shares, complained about rising prices with other pensioners. I watched Roscoe and Lynette's relationship develop, how my son gradually changed, becoming more withdrawn, less confident, how Lynette became more and more in control of their shared finances, their social life, even their conversations. I could see the way she wrinkled her nose when he told some story from his childhood, the way she rolled her eyes when she thought no one could see. And I made a decision that would probably make me a villain in my son's eyes, but one that I'm sure Vivian would approve of. The money exists, all 14 million, but no one but me knows where it is or how to access it. And I intend to keep it secret until I'm sure they won't harm the only thing left of my Vivian, our son. Sometimes at night, when I can't sleep, I imagine Vivian sitting next to me on the veranda. I imagine her telling me that I'm doing the right thing, that she's proud of me. It helps with the doubts that sometimes creep into my heart. Questions about whether I have the right to hide his inheritance from Roscoe. But then I remember the look in Lynette's eyes when she looked around our house. I remember how she once told Roscoe in my presence that old people don't need big houses, they're better off in nursing homes where they're taken care of. I remember her persistently questioning me about Vivian's insurance, about our savings, about the retirement plan, and the doubts fade. I know that sooner or later the truth will come out. Secrets have a way of coming out, especially in a small town like Lompoc. But for now I'm in control, as long as I decide what happens next. I finish my coffee, which has already gone cold, and glance at the clock. It's almost 10. The baseball game is about to start broadcasting. Vivian never understood my love of baseball, but she always pretended to be interested when we watched games together. I get up to go back into the house, and for a moment I think I see her silhouette in the kitchen window. It's just a play of light and shadow, but for a second my heart clenches with pain and longing. I live with ghosts of the past and secrets that could destroy the future. But I am willing to carry this burden, for Vivian, for Roscoe, and maybe for myself, because there are things more important than money. There are principles you can't compromise. There are promises that must be kept, and I will keep mine no matter what it takes. Vivian never wanted recognition. For a woman born in 1955, career was not a top priority, especially in the male-dominated sciences. But she had always had a passion for chemistry. I remember when we met at Berkeley in 1976. I was a graduate student in geology. She was a brilliant chemistry student, one of 3 girls in the class. The first thing I noticed about Vivian was not her copper hair or green eyes, but the way she argued with Professor Harrison about the properties of polymers. Without fear, with confidence backed by knowledge that went far beyond the curriculum. Harrison, known for his stern temper, had only shaken his head at the time and said, "Miss Hammer-Price, if all my students were as prepared as you are, I'd be retired by now." After graduation, Vivian received several offers from research laboratories. A brilliant start to her career was assured. But then she met me. We were married a year after we met. I got a position at Lompoc College, and we moved to a small town where everyone knew each other by name. Vivian got a job at the local lab, but only worked there for 2 years. When Roscoe was born, she decided to stay home to take care of him. "I can always go back to science," she said at the time, "but our son will only be a baby once." But Vivian never truly left science. When Roscoe went to school, she set up a small lab in the garage. Nothing fancy. A table, a microscope, a few flasks and test tubes. The neighbors thought it was just a hobby, a way to pass the time while her son was at school and her husband was at work. I remember coming home earlier than usual one day and finding her immersed in her work. She was writing something down in a notebook, double-checking calculations, oblivious to her surroundings. I watched her for a few minutes before she looked up and saw me. "Yule," she smiled, but there was worry in her eyes. "You're early. The last class was canceled." I moved closer. "What are you working on?" She hesitated before answering. "I think I've found a way to purify water that's much more effective than existing methods," she finally said. "It's just a theory for now, but—" I could see her eyes light up as she began to explain her idea. Technical terms, chemical formulas, graphs. Most of it was beyond my comprehension, but Vivian's enthusiasm was infectious. "You should publish it," I said when she was done. "Or patent it. It could be important." Vivian shook her head. "It's still early. We need more tests, more data." And then she took my hand. "I'm happy the way I am. I don't need the fame." And so began her secret project. Years of research, trial and error. She worked at night when Roscoe and I slept, or during the day when we were at work and school. I watched her home lab gradually expand, filling the entire garage. We began parking the car in the driveway, explaining to the neighbors that there was too much junk in the garage. Roscoe suspected his mother was more than just a housewife. One day when he was about 12, he asked her bluntly, "Mom, you're inventing something out there in the garage, aren't you?" Vivian looked at me before answering. "Yes, honey, I'm working on something. But it's a secret, okay? Our family secret." Roscoe nodded seriously, proud to be privy to an adult secret. But over time, as he became a teenager, his mother's scientific work no longer interested him. He had other concerns: school, friends, first crushes. And when he went off to college, he seemed to have completely forgotten about the family secret. By then, Vivian was close to a breakthrough. Her method of water purification, based on the use of special polymer membranes, was showing incredible results in the laboratory. She could purify even the most contaminated water with minimal energy. "Yule," she said to me one evening as we sat on the veranda, "I think it's time to patent my method." I remember being surprised at the time. "After all these years, why now?" "Because it works," she replied simply. "It really works, and it can help a lot of people." We found a patent attorney who helped us file all the necessary paperwork. Vivian insisted that the patent be in her name, not in the name of any company or institute. "It's my invention," she said. "I want to decide how I want to use it." The patent was granted in 1997. By then, Roscoe had graduated from college and started working for a construction company in Santa Barbara. He came home once a month, always bringing flowers for Vivian and a bottle of whiskey for me. He had a girlfriend, Carol, whom he dated for 5 years. They planned to get married but never made it to the altar. Carol got a job offer in Seattle and left. Roscoe was left heartbroken. Vivian tried to promote her invention, sending information to various water purification companies, but the response was meager. Big corporations didn't take a small-town housewife seriously, even with a patent in hand. "They don't even read my letters," she once said bitterly. "To them, I'm just a crazy old woman with crazy ideas." That all changed in 2021 when one of the largest water treatment companies, Aquapure, faced a major crisis. Their core technology was deemed unsafe for the environment, and they were urgently looking for alternatives. One of their researchers, while going through old patents, came across Vivian's work. I remember the day the Aquapure representative called. Vivian talked to him for almost an hour, answering technical questions, explaining the nuances of her method. When she ended the call, her eyes were glowing with excitement. "They want to meet, Yule. They're really interested." The meeting was set for the following week. Representatives from Aquapure came to our home in Lompoc. 3 men in expensive suits with leather briefcases and polite smiles. They spent the day in Vivian's garage asking questions, studying her notes, watching a demonstration of the method. In the evening when they left, Vivian looked exhausted but happy. "They offered to buy the patent," she said, "for $2 million. I was shocked. $2 million seemed like a huge sum." "That's wonderful, Vivian. You deserve it." But she shook her head. I said no. "What? Why?" "Because my method is worth so much more," she said firmly. "And I want to make sure they use it properly, not put it on the shelf to get rid of the competition." Negotiations with Aquapure went on for months. Vivian was firm in her demands. a much higher price, and guarantees that the technology would be actively used and developed. To my surprise, the company agreed to all the terms. And then Vivian became ill. At first it was just back pain, which we put down to age and long hours spent working in an uncomfortable position. Then she started having digestive problems. She only went to the doctor when she started losing weight and feeling tired all the time. The diagnosis was like a blow to the head. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Vivian listened to the doctor calmly, asked a few questions about the treatment, about the prognosis, and when we left the office, she looked at me and said, "I need to finalize the deal with Aquapure before it's too late." She called the company rep right from her car on the way home, said she was ready to sign the paperwork as soon as possible, didn't mention her diagnosis, didn't try to evoke pity or speed up the process because of her condition, just said it was time. The papers were signed a week later, $14 million for the patent and all related research. The money was transferred into a specially set up account that we both had access to. "Now you and Roscoe will be provided for," Vivian said the evening after the papers were signed, "no matter what happens." I wanted to tell her I'd rather be poor, but with her by my side instead of all the millions of the world without her. But I couldn't. Instead, I just held her hand and watched the sun set over the horizon. Roscoe arrived as soon as he learned of his mother's illness. He spent a lot of time with her, sitting by her bedside for hours, talking about his work, his plans, how he wanted her to get better and meet the girl he had recently started dating. Vivian said nothing to her son about the money, not a word about the patent, about the Aquapure deal. When I asked her why, she said, "This is not the time. He should remember me as a mother, not as a source of sudden wealth." I understood her decision and respected it. But when Vivian was gone, I faced a difficult choice: to tell Roscoe about the inheritance or not. On the one hand, it was his mother's money, his inheritance. On the other, I knew that Vivian wanted to protect him from the possible problems that sudden money could bring. The solution came on its own, about 3 months after Vivian's funeral. Roscoe brought his new girlfriend, Lynette, over to introduce us. They'd been dating for months, but Vivian's illness had kept putting it off. Lynette seemed too perfect, too beautiful, too attentive, too interested in my life, especially the financial part. She asked questions about the house, about the pension, about Vivian's insurance, all under the guise of caring, but with an obvious interest in numbers. It must be hard to keep such a big house on a teacher's pension," she said at dinner, looking around the living room with an appraising eye. "I manage," I answered briefly. "Vivian and I have always been frugal. Roscoe said you were a geology teacher," she continued. "I wonder, did your wife's insurance help with the medical bills?" Roscoe looked embarrassed. "Lynette, please, it's not—" "It's okay, son," I interrupted him. "It's a reasonable question. Yes, Vivian had basic insurance that covered some of the costs. The rest had to be paid for out of savings." "Oh," Lynette looked disappointed, but quickly put a sympathetic expression back on her face. "It must have been hard. Financially, I mean." "Not as hard as losing my wife," I replied, looking her straight in the eye. That exchange made me wary. But the real moment of truth came later, when I overheard Lynette talking on the phone. She went out into the backyard, thinking I was busy in the kitchen and Roscoe was taking a shower. I went out the side door to water the flowers and heard her voice behind the hedge. "Yes, Pam, everything is going according to plan," she said. "The old man lives alone in a huge house that must be worth a lot. Plus maybe his wife's insurance. No, I don't know exactly how much yet, but he taught college, so he should have a decent pension." "Roscoe?" she laughed. "Oh, Roscoe's in love like a boy. He'll do anything I say. Besides, he's an only child, so the whole inheritance will go to him. No, I think the old man can hold on for a few more years, but we can sell the house right after the wedding. Convince him to move into something smaller, for his own good." "Ha ha, yeah, that's right. Clean the old man out and even make him thank you for it." I stood there frozen with shock and anger. This woman that my son was about to bring into our family was blatantly planning to use him for money. Money that she thought we didn't have much of, but that she wanted to get her hands on anyway. What would she do if she knew about the 14 million? At that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't tell Roscoe about Vivian's inheritance, at least not until I was sure the money wouldn't ruin his life, wouldn't make him a target for the likes of Lynette. I had to protect my son, even if I had to lie to him to do it. From that day on, I began to conjure up the image of an elderly man barely making ends meet. I complained about the utility bills, the cost of medication, the need to save money on everything. I intentionally wore old clothes, refused to go out to restaurants, explaining that I couldn't afford it. I even sold some of Vivian's things, her jewelry, her collection of antique books, when in fact I had just stashed them in a safe deposit box at the bank. And all the while, $14 million was sitting in accounts spread across different banks, under different names and companies that I had set up on the advice of a financial advisor. I was the only one who knew where all that money was and how to access it. Roscoe and Lynette were married 6 months after we met. At the wedding, I played the role of proud but financially strapped father. I gave them an antique watch that had belonged to my father, apologizing that I couldn't afford something more expensive. "It's more precious than any money, Dad," Roscoe said, hugging me. Lynette hugged me too, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She had hoped for a more generous gift. After the wedding, they began to visit me less often. There was always a reason: work, fatigue, other plans. But I saw the real reason. Lynette realized that I wasn't going to be financially rewarding in the near future and decided not to waste her precious time on an old man. But I knew she'd be back sooner or later. With her ambition and greed, she would not abandon the idea of getting everything she could from her husband's father. And I was ready for it. I created a plan that would protect Vivian's money and hopefully open Roscoe's eyes to his wife's true nature. And now I wait, waiting for the moment when the truth comes out and the cards are dealt. I'm waiting to see Lynette's face when she realizes her plans are falling apart. And most of all, I'm waiting for my son to finally see who's really beside him. It will be my last gift to him, the most important one of all. The truth often surfaces at the most unexpected moment. That's what happened with my secret. It all started with a harmless visit from Roscoe and Lynette one April weekend. They arrived unannounced, which in itself was unusual. Lynette always insisted on planning ahead. "Dad, we were just driving by and thought we'd stop by," Roscoe explained, hugging me on the doorstep. In fact, from their home in Santa Barbara to Lompoc, a good 80 kilometers, so passing by sounded lame. But I was glad to see my son, even if it was with Lynette, whose smile never reached my eyes. "Yule, how are you feeling?" she asked, entering the house and immediately glancing around the living room, as if assessing the property. "We are so worried about you living here alone." "I'm doing just fine," I replied, trying to hide my irritation at her fake concern. "Would you like some tea?" While I made tea in the kitchen, Roscoe joined me, leaving Lynette in the living room. "Dad, I wanted to talk to you about something," he began quietly, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid his wife would hear. "What is it, son? You know I've always respected your decisions." He rubbed the back of his neck nervously, a habit from his childhood when he was worried. "But Lynette thinks you should think about selling the house. It's too big for one person, and the upkeep costs are—" "Roscoe," I interrupted him, "this house is all I have left of my life with your mother. I'm not moving anywhere." He sighed, clearly expecting that answer. "I understand, Dad. Just think about it, okay? Lynette and I could help you find something smaller, more comfortable." I could see the genuine concern in his eyes, but I could feel Lynette's influence behind his words. My son would never suggest that I sell the family home on my own initiative. When we returned to the living room with tea, Lynette had already had time to tour the entire first floor. She was sitting on the sofa with that peculiar expression on her face that appeared when she was preparing to get something she wanted. "Yule," she began in a sweet voice, "while you were making tea, I noticed that the paint on the outside of the house is peeling and a few of the roof tiles look damaged. Have you given any thought to repairs?" "I deal with ongoing problems as they arise," I replied flatly. "Ah, but it's expensive, isn't it?" Dash. She tilted her head, as if in genuine sympathy. "On your pension." "My pension is enough," I cut her off. Of course, of course." She smiled the smile that didn't affect her eyes. "I'm just thinking of your well-being. You're not getting any younger, Yule, and taking care of such a large house can become burdensome." I felt irritation growing inside, but I tried to hide it. It was not the time to reveal my cards. "Thank you for your concern, Lynette, but I prefer to decide for myself what is or isn't burdensome. The conversation turned to more neutral topics: the weather, baseball season, Roscoe's job. But I sensed Lynette wouldn't give up on her idea. She was the kind of person who didn't give up easily, especially when it came to money. Before we left, Roscoe asked to use the restroom, and Lynette volunteered to help me put away the teacups. In the kitchen, she suddenly asked, "Yule, where's Vivian's lab gone?" Roscoe said it used to take up the whole garage. I almost dropped the cup from my hands. Roscoe never mentioned the lab after his mom died, so he'd told Lynette about Vivian's work. "I took it apart," I answered, trying to sound indifferent. "Sold the equipment. Needed the money to pay the medical bills." "Oh, I see," Lynette nodded, but there was something like suspicion in her eyes. "Did Vivian have any projects? Research?" Roscoe said she was a very smart woman. "Nothing serious," I lied. "Just a hobby." When they finally left, I felt uneasy. Lynette asked two specific questions about Vivian's work. What else had Roscoe told her? And what did she really know? My fears were confirmed 3 weeks later. A 7 a.m. phone call never bodes well. "Mr. Haviland?" Lynette's voice sounded cold and formal. "We need to talk. Roscoe and I will be there at 11 tonight. And our lawyer, Mr. Prescott, will be with us." "Lawyer?" I interjected. "Why do we need a lawyer for a family conversation?" "You know very well why," she said. 11 o'clock, Yule." She hung up without waiting for an answer. I sat there clutching the phone in my hand, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. She'd recognized it. Somehow, Lynette had found out about the money. I had 4 hours to prepare. I called my attorney, Morris Feldman, who I'd worked with for the past 2 years creating my plan. I explained the situation and asked him to come over. "I'll be at your place at 10:30, he said. "Don't worry, Yule. All the paperwork is in order. Everything is done by the law." I spent the rest of the time preparing for the confrontation. Took all the necessary papers out of the safe hidden behind a painting in my office. Another precaution no one knew about. Reread the terms of the trust I'd created. Made sure all the details of my plan were in place. Morris arrived right on time. A short, full-bodied man in an expensive suit with shrewd eyes behind thick glasses. He and I had hit it off 2 years ago when I was looking for a lawyer to implement my plan. He didn't ask too many questions and understood my desire to protect Vivian's inheritance from potential problems. "They're coming with a lawyer," I told him as I poured coffee. "They'll probably try to challenge the trust or demand an immediate distribution of the funds." Morris smiled, sipping his coffee. "Let them try. You've set up one of the most secure trusts I've ever seen. Even I couldn't get around it, and I've been doing this for 30 years. His confidence reassured me a little, but I was still nervous. Not because of the money, I knew it was safe. It was Roscoe. How would he react when he found out I'd kept such important information from him? Would he understand my motives, or would he see only deception? At 11:05, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and went to open it. Morris following me. 3 men stood on the threshold. Roscoe looking confused and uncertain, Lynette with a look of triumph on her face, and a tall, thin man with a leather briefcase, obviously Mr. Prescott. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. We made ourselves comfortable in the parlor. Morris sat next to me on the couch, and our guests took the chairs opposite. Lynette immediately took the initiative. "Yule, I'm not going to beat around the bush," she began, leaning forward slightly. "We know about the money. The $14 million that Vivian received for her patent before she died. The money you hid from your own son." I looked at Roscoe. He avoided my gaze, staring at his hands folded in his lap. "And how did you find out about it, Lynette?" I asked calmly. "It doesn't matter," she cut him off. "What matters is that you deceived Roscoe. You deprived him of his rightful inheritance." "I didn't deprive Roscoe of anything," I replied. "I just took steps to protect his mother's inheritance." "Protect it?" She snorted. "From who?" "From your own son." "From people who could use him for money." I looked her straight in the eye, and she looked away first. Mr. Prescott cleared his throat and joined the conversation. Mr. Haviland, regardless of your intentions, the fact remains that you have concealed substantial funds that by law should be part of your late wife's inheritance and therefore should be divided between you and your son as her only child." You're not quite right, Mr. Prescott, Morris interjected, pulling a folder of documents from his briefcase. The funds in question were not hidden. They had been legally transferred into a trust established by Mr. Haviland 2 years ago, in full compliance with all legal requirements. He handed copies of the documents to Prescott, who began to review them quickly. I watched his expression change from confidence to confusion, then to realization, and finally to something resembling respect. What is it? Lynette asked impatiently, trying to look through the papers. What is this fund? Prescott raised his eyes from the papers and looked at her. Mrs. Haviland, your father-in-law set up an irrevocable trust with very specific terms for distributing the funds. The money is indeed in the trust, but he looked at the documents again as if he couldn't believe his eyes. They are inaccessible to anyone, including Mr. Haviland himself, until certain conditions are met. What conditions? Lynette demanded. Tell us the conditions. I decided it was time for me to intervene. Vivian's money will be available only under the following circumstances, I began, feeling strangely calm. First, Roscoe could access his share 30% of the total amount if he could prove that he would use it to create his own business that would benefit society, like his mother's invention. I paused, watching my son's reaction. Roscoe finally looked up at me, his eyes wide with surprise. Second, I continued, another 30% can be used to educate future generations of our family Vivian's grandchildren, if there are any. And the other 40%? Lynette asked, and I saw her eyes sparkle greedily. The other 40% will go to establish the Vivian Haviland Foundation, which will fund research into water purification in developing countries. That clause cannot be changed under any circumstances. I glanced at Morris, who nodded in affirmation. This is ridiculous, Lynette exclaimed. You can't just freeze $14 million like that. Roscoe is entitled to his share now. Legally, Morris replied calmly, Mr. Haviland had every right to dispose of those funds in that way. The trust was legally created, all taxes paid, all formalities observed. We'll challenge that in court, Lynette turned to her lawyer. We can challenge it, right? Prescott looked uncertain. We can try, but I must warn you, trusts like this are extremely difficult to challenge if they've been properly executed. And this one, he tapped his finger on the documents, is perfect. I don't understand, Roscoe finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide it all this time? I looked at my son, feeling my heart ache at the look of betrayal on his face. Your mother wanted to protect you, Roscoe, and so did I. Sudden wealth can change people, attract those who are only interested in money and not yourself. I didn't look at Lynette as I said those words, but I saw her turn pale. You don't think I could do the right thing with the money? Roscoe's voice was resentful. You don't trust me? It's not about trust, son. It's about protection. Vivian didn't work her whole life on her invention so that the money would be spent on expensive cars or houses. She wanted it to do some good. And so you decided for everyone, Lynette interjected, her voice shaking with anger. You took millions that could make a difference in our lives right now. Make a difference? I raised an eyebrow. And how exactly would that be, Lynette? What would you do with that money? Buy a bigger house? A more expensive car? Travel the world? Is that what's really important? You don't get to decide what's important to us. She was practically screaming. That money belongs to Roscoe. He's Vivian's son. And that's why the terms of the trust are designed to protect his interests in the long run, I replied calmly. If Roscoe really wants to start a business that will benefit the community, the money will be available. If you have children, their education will be fully provided for. Isn't that better than just getting a large sum of money and spending it? We could invest, Lynette began, but I interrupted her. In that case, present your investment plan to the Trust's Board of Trustees. If it meets the community benefit criteria set forth in the documents, you'll receive funding. The Board of Trustees, Roscoe interjected. Who's on it? Me, Morris, and 2 independent financial advisors, I answered. And when I die, my place will be taken by a person I haven't decided on yet. Perhaps it will be you, Roscoe, if I'm sure you understand the importance of your mother's legacy. Lynette stood up abruptly, her face contorted with rage. This is manipulation. You're trying to control Roscoe even after Vivian's death. You, Lynette, calm down. Roscoe put his hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. No, I will not calm down. That old man tricked us, hid millions, and now he's trying to dictate terms. We have to fight this, Roscoe. We have to. Mrs. Haviland, Morris intervened, let me make this legally clear. Even if you sue, the chances of success are minimal. The trust is impeccable, and all of Mr. Haviland's actions were legal. A lawsuit would be long, expensive, and probably fruitless for you. Lynette froze, her face turning even paler. I could see the calculus going on in her eyes. The cost of litigation versus the potential benefits, the likelihood of success, the time it would all take. Mr. Prescott, she turned to her lawyer. What do you say? Prescott looked uncomfortable under her steady gaze. As I said, it is extremely difficult to overturn such a trust, especially since it was set up long before there was any claim on your part. The court would probably side with Mr. Haviland. So there's nothing we can do? There was disbelief in her voice. You can, I replied. You can accept the terms of the trust and work within it. Present a business plan that will benefit the community. Think about the future, not just today. Lynette looked at me with such hatred that if looks could kill, I'd be dead by now. Then she turned to Roscoe. Did you hear that? Your father practically stole your inheritance. He robbed us of a future we could have had. And you just sit there and say nothing? Roscoe looked torn between loyalty to his wife and understanding my motives. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between resenting me for hiding the truth and realizing that the terms of the trust weren't really that unreasonable. Lynette, he began cautiously, maybe we should think about this. If we really want to start our own business. Are you crazy? She interrupted. Are you on his side after he's been lying to us for years? I'm not on anyone's side. Roscoe raised his voice. I'm just trying to understand the situation. There's nothing to understand. Lynette grabbed his bag. Your father deceived us, and you have to choose. Either you're with me or with him. There was a heavy silence in the room. I could see my son agonizing, trying to find a way out of a situation where any choice would hurt someone close to him. Lynette, he finally said, let's not make any rash decisions. We need time to think things through. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned to Prescott. We're leaving, and we're not done with this case yet. Prescott nodded, gathered his papers, and stood up. Roscoe followed, but stopped at the door and turned to me. Dad, I need some time. I understand, son, I replied quietly. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. After they left, Morris and I sat in silence. Finally, he spoke. Well, that went better than I expected. Really? I raised an eyebrow. They didn't sue you on the spot, he smiled. And your son doesn't seem to be completely on his wife's side. That's something, I sighed, feeling tired from the tension of the last few hours. What now, Morris? Now we wait. They can sue, though I doubt Prescott would advise them to do so. They could try to comply with the terms of the trust, or Lynette could try to find another way to get to the money. I finished for him. Yes, Morris nodded. Be careful, Yule. People like her don't give up easily. I know, I replied. That's why I set up this trust, not only to protect Vivian's legacy, but to protect Roscoe from those who see him only as an access to money. Morris gathered his papers and stood up. I'll be in touch. Call me if you need anything else. After he left, I sat alone in the living room, thinking about what had happened. Lynette now knew the truth, and her reaction confirmed all my suspicions. She was only interested in money, not in the welfare of the family, not in Vivian's legacy, not in a future that could be built wisely and responsibly. But what did Roscoe think? His reaction was more complicated, more ambiguous. I saw resentment in his eyes, distrust, disappointment, but I also saw glimmers of understanding, moments when he seemed to grasp the essence of what I was trying to do. Would I be able to regain my son's trust? Or would Lynette finally turn him against me? What would she do next? These questions swirled around in my head, keeping me on my toes. But I knew one thing for sure. I didn't regret my decision. Vivian's money was safe, it couldn't be squandered or misused. And if Roscoe ever understood my motives, if he ever saw Lynette for who she really was, that money would be waiting for him, ready to help him build a future his mother could be proud of. In the meantime, I will wait and see, and hope the truth prevails, just like Vivian always told me. A week passed after Lynette's visit with the lawyer. I hadn't heard a word from Roscoe, although I tried calling him several times. The phone rang, but no one answered. Once I even left a message on the answering machine, a simple, "Call me, son," but there was no response. The silence was more agonizing than any angry conversation. I knew something would happen sooner or later. Lynette wasn't the type to calmly accept defeat, and I was right. The first sign came on Wednesday when Eleanor Parkins, my neighbor for 20 years, rang the doorbell with a basket of homemade cookies. "Yule, darling," she began, standing on the doorstep. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right. There are such terrible rumors going around." Rumors? I invited her in, feeling the weight in my chest grow heavy. "What rumors, Eleanor?" She walked into the living room, set the basket on the coffee table, and sat down, nervously smoothing the creases in her skirt. "Well, I don't usually pay much attention to gossip, you know me, but they say you hid Vivian's inheritance from Roscoe. Like she left millions and you hid it." "Where did you hear that?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "At Mira's salon yesterday. Daisy Ramsey's niece was there, who's friends with Lynette's cousin's wife," she faltered. "Oh my God, it's true, isn't it? I can see it in your face." I sighed. There was no point in denying the obvious. "The situation is more complicated than it seems, Eleanor. Yes, Vivian did leave a substantial sum, but the money isn't hidden, it's in a trust fund, with certain conditions for its use." Eleanor rounded her eyes. "So it's all true then. But Yule, why didn't you tell Roscoe? He's such a good boy." "Precisely because he is a good boy," I answered. "Too trusting. I wanted to protect him." "From what?" Eleanor leaned closer, as if we were discussing a state secret. "From people who might use him for money." I didn't specify that I meant Lynette. Eleanor was perceptive enough to understand. "Oh," she leaned back in her chair. "That's ambiguous, Yule. People may not understand. People rarely understand the whole picture," I shrugged. "But thanks for the warning, Eleanor, and for the cookies." After she left, I sat for a long time, pondering. If the rumors had already reached Mira's salon, then soon the entire Lompoc community would be discussing me. Small towns live on gossip, and I knew that Lynette's version of events was hardly showing me in a favorable light. My fears were confirmed the next day when I went to the local supermarket. Usually a grocery shopping trip involved a few greetings from acquaintances, perhaps a brief conversation with the cashier about the weather or local news. But this time was different. People averted their eyes as I walked by. Mrs. Howard, who usually stopped to chat about her grandchildren, suddenly remembered she'd forgotten her milk and hurried off to another department. Even Pete, the cashier with whom I always exchanged jokes about baseball teams, was unusually reserved. Returning home with bags of groceries, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in front of my house. A woman in her 30s with a laptop on her lap sat behind the wheel, clearly expecting someone. As I got closer, she jumped out of the car. "Dash Mr. Haviland? Yule Haviland?" She held out her hand. "I'm Heather Walsh from the Lompoc Times. Can I ask you a few questions?" That's all I needed. Local paper. "About what, Ms. Walsh?" I asked without shaking her hand. "About your late wife's estate. We have information that you withheld a substantial sum from your son and his wife. Is that true?" I took a closer look at her. Heather Walsh looked like a typical young reporter, bright, energetic, with her notebook at the ready and her eyes burning with excitement. To her, it was just an interesting story, a way to attract readers. "Dash Ms. Walsh, family matters are private. I don't think they're of public interest." $14 million isn't just family business, Mr. Haviland, she countered. "Especially when it's a patent that could help people around the world get access to clean water. Doesn't the public have a right to know what happened to that money?" I was surprised. She knew not only about the amount, but also about Vivian's patent. Lynette had obviously done some good preparatory work. "The money is in a trust fund," I answered dryly. "I know, and it will be used to help people get access to clean water, among other things." Now, if you'll excuse me, I tried to walk past her toward the house, but she wouldn't budge. Your daughter-in-law claims that you are manipulating your son, trying to control his life through this money. What do you say to that accusation? I stopped and turned to her. Ms. Walsh, I've lived in Lompoc for almost 40 years. Taught many of the people who now read your paper. Do you really think I'm the kind of man who would manipulate his own son? She looked slightly embarrassed, but quickly regained a professional expression. I'm just asking questions, Mr. Havlin. As a journalist, I have to present both sides of the story. Then here's my side. I'm protecting my wife's legacy and my son's future. The rest is none of your business. Good day to you. I walked into the house and closed the door without looking back. Through the window, I saw Heather Walsh standing in front of the house for a while, writing something in her notebook. And then she got into her car and drove away. I knew this was just the beginning. If Lynette had gotten the local press involved, then she was serious about tarnishing me in the eyes of the community. A small town's a dangerous place for people with bad rumors. People stop saying hello. Invitations to social events stop coming. You become an outcast in your own home. But worst of all, I couldn't talk to Roscoe. Explain my position to him, help him see his wife's true nature. Lynette was obviously doing her best to isolate him from me. That same evening, Morris called. Ewell, did you see today's edition of the Lompoc Times? No, what's in it? An article about you and the trust situation. It's pretty one-sided, I have to say. You're practically portrayed as the villain who deprived your son of his rightful inheritance. I sigh. She works fast, that Heather Walsh. Your sister-in-law and sources close to the family are being quoted, Morris continued. And they say you were always against Roscoe's marriage, that you tried to control his life, and that setting up the trust was just a way to continue that control after your wife's death. Have they presented my position? Minimally. They mention that you filed a claim to protect your wife's legacy, but no details. They end with you refusing to comment further. Shigunam. Well, that's to be expected. I rubbed my eyes, feeling tired. What now, Morris? We could file an official retraction, demand that the paper present your point of view more fully, or even threaten a libel suit, and turn it into a bigger scandal? No, I don't think that would help. Then you'll just have to get over it, Ewell. People will talk and forget. There's always a new sensation. But Morris underestimated Lynette. She wasn't going to let people forget. The next day, I got a call from Henry Lawson, chairman of the local Veterans Club, of which I'd been a member for the past 10 years. Ewell, I hate to say this, but the committee has decided to ask you to temporarily refrain from attending club meetings until the situation with your family's cleared up. Henry, we've known each other for 30 years, I said, my anger rising inside me. Do you really believe everything you read in the papers? It's not about what I believe, Ewell. It's about the reputation of the club. We can't have scandals. I see, I interrupted him. Don't worry, Henry, I won't cause any trouble. That call was followed by others. The library board, where I was a volunteer, suddenly decided they no longer needed my help. The Lompoc Conservation Group, which Vivian and I had been a part of since its inception, sent an email asking me to take a pause in my involvement. One by one, the bridges linking me to the community were crumbling. I felt like an outcast in the town I had considered home for nearly 4 decades. On Saturday morning, when I went out to pick up the mail, I found that someone had written in red paint on my driveway, "Return the money to your son, old lord." It was a low blow. It's one thing to get cold stares from neighbors or refuse to participate in community events, but vandalism. Lynette was really turning the whole town against me. I spent 2 hours scrubbing the paint off, feeling the stares of neighbors passing by. No one stopped to offer help. No one even asked what was wrong. They just stared and walked by, as if I had become invisible, a ghost in my own neighborhood. That evening, as I sat on the veranda, trying to find solace in memories of the times when Vivian had been around, a car pulled up to the house. A young man appeared on the doorstep. Mr. Havland? He held out his hand. Jason Taylor, Santa Barbara Chronicle. I'd like to hear your side of the story. Another journalist, I sighed. Haven't the papers written enough already? I read the article in the Lompoc Times, he said. I found it one-sided. I specialize in investigative journalism, and I'm interested in more than just the family scandal. I'm interested in your wife's work, the patent, the water purification technology. It could be an important story. His interest in Vivian's work, not just the conflict, intrigued me. Come in, Mr. Taylor. We talked for almost 2 hours. I told him about Vivian, about her research, about the technology that could change the lives of millions of people, her decision to sell her patent before she died to secure her family's future. I explained why I'd set up a trust with special terms, though I didn't mention my suspicions about Lynette. I'd like to learn more about the patent, about AquaPure, about the technology itself, Jason said when I was done. Ketron on turn. With your permission, I'd like to conduct a full investigation. Do whatever you think you need to do, I said. I just want the truth to come out. After Jason left, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, someone wanted to hear my side of the story. Someone interested not just in the money, but in Vivian's life, her work, her legacy. The next day I saw Roscoe sitting in his car in front of the house. He didn't go in, just stared at the house as if gathering his thoughts. I got out and walked over to him. Hi, Dad, he said quietly, rolling down the window. Roscoe, I put my hand on the car door. It's good to see you, son. Yeah? I was just driving by. He didn't look me in the eye. You want to come in? Talk? He shook his head. I don't think that's a good idea. Lynette, Sigram. Lynette doesn't need to know, I interrupted. This is between us, Roscoe. He finally looked at me. His eyes were a mixture of hurt and confusion. Why didn't you tell me, Dad? About the money? About Mom's job? You've been lying to me all these years. I didn't lie, son. I just didn't tell the whole truth. I promised your mother I'd protect you. Protect me from what? Your own inheritance? From people who are only attracted to money, I answered quietly. From those who would use you for access to fortune. Roscoe gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. You're talking about Lynette. It wasn't a question. I'm talking about anyone who sees you not as a person, but as a means to make money. Lynette loves me, he said with uncertainty in his voice. She cares about me. And why is she turning you against me? Why spread rumors all over town? Why threaten to sue me? She's just protecting my interests. Your interests or yours? I sighed. Roscoe, I set up the trust so that your mother's money would serve a noble purpose. You can access your share if you use it to create something useful like your mother did. Isn't that unreasonable? Roscoe was silent for a while, looking straight in front of him. I don't know what to think, Dad. It's all too complicated. Then think about what your mother would have done. Vivian was never after money or luxury. She wanted her work to help people. Something flashed in Roscoe's eyes, perhaps understanding, perhaps doubt. I have to go, he said at last. Lynette's waiting for me. Son, I squeezed his hand through the window. Dash, I'm always here for you, no matter what happens. He nodded, started the car, and drove away. I watched him go with a heavy heart. Roscoe was at a crossroads, torn between loyalty to his wife and bonding with his father. I hoped he'd make the right choice. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps all was not yet lost. For 3 days after talking to Roscoe, I lived in limbo. Every ring of the phone made my heart jump, hoping it was my son. But the only calls were from journalists eager for comment or anonymous people with threats and insults. I stopped answering calls from unfamiliar numbers. The city of Lompoc, which had been my home for nearly 4 decades, had become a foreign, hostile territory. Thursday morning, I was awakened by a persistent knock on my door. Standing on the doorstep was Jason Taylor, a reporter for the Santa Barbara Chronicle. His face was a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Mr. Haviland, I'm sorry for the early visit, but I need to talk to you urgently. I let him in, and we walked into the kitchen. I offered him coffee, which he gratefully accepted. I've been doing a little research, he began, pulling a laptop out of his bag. And I found something interesting about your sister-in-law. He opened the laptop and turned the screen toward me. It had a social media page open, dated 4 years earlier. A post from someone named Pamela Rayner with a picture of 2 smiling women. One of them was Lynette. With my best friend Lynette. Today she told me about her new project, to find a rich man and secure her future. Have a good hunt, friend. After your millionaire hunt, sure marry a rich man. I felt my insides tighten. That's not all, Jason continued, scrolling down the page. Here are the comments on that post. Lynette, 4 years ago. Got my eye on one. Divorced, works in construction, only son of a college professor. Family could be flush with cash, need to dig deeper. Pamela, 4 years ago. Let me know what you find. Maybe there's someone out there for me too. Lynette, 4 years ago. Found out that his mother was some kind of scientist. They say she was working on something important in a home lab. Maybe there are patents or something valuable in there. I'll find out. I stared at those lines, feeling anger and bitterness rise up inside. I had been right all along. Lynette was looking for Roscoe purposefully because of the money she suspected our family might have. How did you find it? I asked when I could speak. It was in the public domain, just old posts that no one bothered to delete, Jason answered. But that wasn't the only thing I found. He opened another file, a scanned newspaper article from 2 years ago from a small town in Arizona. Local resident charged with fraud. Lynette Boggs, 29 years old, has been charged with attempting to defraud an elderly man to gain access to his savings. According to the prosecution, Boggs posed as a social worker and tried to convince 72-year-old Warren Cage to sign documents giving her the authority to handle his finances. The case was solved thanks to the vigilance of a bank teller who noticed the suspicious activity. The case was closed due to lack of evidence, Jason explained. Cage refused to testify, perhaps out of embarrassment or fear. Lynette moved out shortly afterward, and a few months later she was already dating your son. I felt nauseous. This was worse than I could have imagined. Lynette wasn't just looking for a rich husband. She was a con artist with a history of stalking the elderly for their money. There's more. Jason opened a third file. I spoke to representatives of Aquapure, the company that bought your wife's patent. They confirmed the amount of the deal, $14 million. But more importantly, they told me that Vivian's technology is truly revolutionary. They're already using it in several pilot projects in Africa and South Asia, and the results are amazing. Thousands of people have access to clean water thanks to your wife's invention. This news warmed my heart. Vivian always wanted her work to help people. Now, even after her death, her legacy lived on. I'm going to write an article, Jason continued. Not just about a family conflict over money, but about a brilliant woman whose invention changed lives, about trying to protect her legacy, and about those who try to exploit it. With your permission, of course. You have my permission, I replied. The truth must come out, for Vivian's sake, for Roscoe's sake. Jason nodded, closing the laptop. The article will come out tomorrow. I wanted to warn you in advance. It might cause a reaction. After he left, I sat for a long time, staring out the window at the quiet street of Lompoc. I now had proof that Lynette wasn't who she said she was. But how to get it to Roscoe? Would he believe me, or would he think it was another attempt to turn him against his wife? The answer came the next day, when the Santa Barbara Chronicle published Jason's article, Science, Legacy, and Betrayal. The incredible story of Vivian Haviland and her world-changing invention. The article took up almost an entire spread, with photos of Vivian in her home lab, patent documents, images of Aquapure projects in developing countries, and of course, screenshots of Lynette's posts and an article about her previous fraudulent activities. My phone rang at 10 in the morning. It was Roscoe. His voice sounded hoarse, like he'd been screaming or crying for a long time. Dad, I just read the article. Is it true? About Lynette? Yes, son, I answered quietly. I'm sorry. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long, I thought he'd hung up. Roscoe, are you there? Yeah, his voice was barely audible. I don't know what to do, Dad. I don't know what to think. Come home, I said. We'll talk. I can't. Lynette, she's hysterical. She's screaming that it's all a lie, that you and that reporter are conspiring against her. She wants to sue the paper. What do you think? I asked cautiously. There was another pause. I don't know. Part of me wants to believe her. But then I remember how she was always asking about Mom, about her work, how she insisted that we sell the house after your... He didn't finish the sentence. God, Dad, how could I have been so blind? Love makes us blind, son, I said softly. You saw in it what you wanted to see. I need time. His voice became firmer. I have to figure all this out. I understand, and I'll be here when you're ready. After talking to Roscoe, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Jason's article had revealed the truth, but it was a painful truth that could destroy my son's marriage. I wanted to protect Roscoe, but not at the cost of his happiness. Although, if his happiness was based on a lie, maybe it wasn't worth preserving. I got a call from Morris this afternoon. Ewell, have you seen today's Chronicle? He asked without preamble. Yes, I did. Huh. This article changes everything. Lynette and her lawyer called me this morning, threatening a libel suit, demanding the immediate dissolution of the trust. But now, with this evidence of her fraudulent intentions, their position is significantly weakened. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that if they do sue, we have a strong defense for your actions. You could even counter-sue, accusing Lynette of attempted fraud. I don't want to sue my son's wife, Morris. I sighed. I just want Roscoe to realize the truth and make the right decision. It's his choice, Ewell, but at least now he has all the facts. In the evening, there was a knock at the door. I expected to see journalists, or perhaps Roscoe, but Eleanor Parkins, my neighbor, stood on the doorstep. Ewell, she reached out and squeezed my hand. I've read the article. I'm so sorry I doubted you. We all should have known you weren't capable of what you were accused of. Thank you, Eleanor. I smiled at her. Come in and have some tea. I'd love to. And you know, I'm not the only one who's had a change of heart. The whole town's buzzing. Everyone read the article. Lynette is now persona non grata in Lompoc. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea, and Eleanor told me how quickly public opinion was changing. Calls from Henry Lawson apologizing and inviting me back to the Veterans Club. A letter from the library board asking me to resume volunteering. Even the minister of the local church, even though I wasn't a parishioner, called to express support. People are sometimes too quick to judge, Eleanor said. But they are also capable of admitting their mistakes. After she left, I sat on the veranda, watching the sun set over the horizon. I thought of Vivian, of how much she loved those quiet evenings, of her dreams of making a difference in the world, of her love for our son. What would she say now? How would she act? My musings were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up. Roscoe, alone. He got out of the car and walked slowly to the veranda, his shoulders slumped, his face gaunt. Hi, Dad, he said quietly. Hi, son. I rose to hug him, but he stopped me with a gesture. Wait, there's something I have to say first. He sat down on the veranda steps, looking straight in front of him. I was an idiot, a blind, stubborn idiot. I should have listened to you. I should have seen the signs. You loved her, Roscoe. It's natural to trust the ones you love. I'm not sure it was love. He shook his head. More like a need to be needed. After Carol, I was so lonely. And then Lynette came along, beautiful, attentive, seemed to really care about me. She's a good actress, I remarked. Yes, he grinned bitterly. Very good. You know what she said when I asked her about those social media posts? That it was just a joke between friends, that it had nothing to do with us, that she fell in love with me at first sight without even knowing about my family. Did you? I wanted to believe her, Dad. I really did. But then I remembered all those little things, how she was always asking about Mom, about her job, how she insisted we move to Lompoc after we got married, closer to you, even though she used to say she hated small towns, how she suggested you sell the house and move to something smaller, more comfortable. He fell silent, gathering his thoughts. And that Arizona article, I asked her about it. She said it was a mistake, that the police had gotten it wrong, that she really was a social worker and was trying to help that old man. But her eyes, there was no sincerity in them, Dad. Just calculating, just thinking about how to get out of it. What are you going to do? I asked cautiously. I don't know, he ran his hand through his hair. We had a fight, a big one. She screamed that she would destroy you, the journalist, and the paper, that she'd sue everyone, that she'd prove it was all lies. And then she suddenly switched gears. She started talking about how much she loved me, how happy we could be if only we had access to money, how we could travel, buy our dream house, start a new life. And what did you say? I asked her if she loved me or my potential inheritance. She burst into tears, said I was cruel, that I was just like you, suspicious, distrustful, that if I really loved her, I would never doubt her feelings. Roscoe looked up at me, eyes full of pain. Classic manipulation, huh? Turning it around like it's my fault? It's called gaslighting, I nodded. Shiaruwas, making you doubt your own perception of reality, your own feelings and thoughts. How could I have been so blind, Dad? How could I not see it all? We see what we want to see, son, especially when it comes to love. We sat in silence, watching the last rays of sunlight color the sky in shades of pink and orange. I'm not going back to her, Roscoe finally said. I can't. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't pretend that I didn't know, that everything was the same. Would you want to? I asked quietly. He was silent for a long time before he answered. No. I guess a part of me always felt that something was wrong, that her love wasn't real. I just didn't want to admit it. What are you going to do now? I don't know, he shrugged. Got a motel room on the outskirts of town. Can't stay in our house. Too many memories. I'll have to get a lawyer. Start the divorce process. You could stay here, I suggested. Your room is still there. Roscoe looked at me with gratitude. Thanks, Dad. Maybe for a few days, until I figure out what to do next. And Roscoe, I put my hand on his shoulder, about the trust. I can make changes. Make the funds more accessible to you if you want. He shook his head. No, Dad. Leave it the way it is. You were right all along. Mom's money should serve a noble purpose, as she intended. But some of it belongs to you by right, 30%, and I'll have access to it when I figure out how to use it properly, he smiled weakly. Maybe when this whole storm dies down, I'll actually start my own business. Something to do with water resources, with the environment. Something my mom would be proud of. I hugged my son, feeling the tension of the last few weeks finally let go. She's already proud of you, Roscoe. Wherever she is now, she's proud that you had the strength to see the truth and do the right thing. I miss her, he whispered, every day. Me too, son. Me too. We sat on the veranda until late at night, talking about Vivian, about her work, about her dreams and hopes. I told Roscoe stories he had never heard about how we met at Berkeley, about the early years at Lompoc, about her experiments in the garage, about her decision to sell her patent before she died. He listened with the avidity of a man discovering a new facet of a loved one he thought he knew completely. I'd like to know more about her invention, he said when I finished the story. How it works, how it helps people. I have all her notes, all her research. They're yours if you want them. I do, he nodded. Maybe I can continue her work. Not as chemist, of course, but by helping to implement her technology, to disseminate it, to make it available to those who need it. That would be wonderful, Roscoe. That's exactly what she'd want. When we finally got inside, it was well past midnight. I showed Roscoe his old room, hardly changed since he left for college years ago. Posters of rock bands on the walls, bookshelves filled with textbooks and novels, sports trophies on the dresser. God, it's like time travel, he grinned. You didn't change anything. I didn't see any reason to, I shrugged. It's your room, always has been and always will be. He hugged me tightly, like he hadn't hugged me in years. Thanks, Dad, for everything, for trying to protect me, for not giving up, even when I turned my back on you. That's what fathers are for, son. I patted him on the back. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be another day. I walked out, closing the door behind me, and leaned against it for a moment, feeling tears come to my eyes. My son was home. The truth had triumphed. Vivian's legacy was protected, and though I knew there were still many challenges ahead, Roscoe's divorce, possible litigation with Lynette, the long process of rebuilding his life, I felt a peace I hadn't felt since Vivian's death. She would approve. She would understand. Before going to bed, I walked to my office and pulled out of my desk drawer a photograph of Vivian, taken shortly before her illness. She was standing in her lab, smiling into the camera, holding a flask of some kind of clear liquid. Her eyes shone with that special light that appeared whenever she was passionate about her work. We did it, Vivian, I whispered, looking at the photograph. Your legacy is safe. Our son is home. Everything is going to be okay. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. Roscoe lived in my house for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of relative peace as we slowly rebuilt our broken bonds. We talked about Vivian, about her work, about his plans for the future. He started going through her research notes, trying to understand the principles of the water purification technology she had developed. Sometimes I caught him in her former lab, the garage I had remodeled again after her death, sitting over her notebooks, with the same focused expression I had so often seen on her face. The silence was deceptive. We both knew Lynette wouldn't give up so easily. Wednesday morning, as we were eating breakfast, the doorbell rang. A sheriff's officer stood on the doorstep with papers in his hands. Mr. Ewell Haviland? He asked in an official tone. Yes, that's me, I answered, feeling my insides clench. You are being served with a subpoena. He handed me an envelope. You are charged with slander, defamation, and willful infliction of emotional distress on Lynette Haviland. I took the envelope, trying to remain calm. Thank you, officer. I got the paperwork. After he left, I returned to the kitchen, where Roscoe was waiting with a tense expression on his face. Did Lynette sue? He asked, though the answer was obvious. Yes, I placed the envelope on the table. She's suing me for slander, defamation, and emotional distress. Damn it, Roscoe shook his head. I should have seen this coming. She threatened to sue everyone. You, the reporter, the newspaper. We were ready for it. I tried to reassure him. Morris warned me it was possible. I called Morris, who arrived an hour later. We sat in the living room studying the papers. It's a weak claim, Morris said after reading it. She claims that everything published in the article is a lie, that the social media screenshots are faked, that the Arizona fraud story was a mistake and she was fully vindicated. But she has no evidence of forgery, and the Arizona newspaper article is an official document. What should we do? Roscoe asked. Defend ourselves, Morris shrugged, and maybe countersue. We have proof of her intentions, her past. We can accuse her of attempted fraud, of slandering your father, of spreading false rumors throughout Lompoc. Roscoe looked worried. I don't want to turn this into a war, he said. I just want it to be over. Unfortunately, your wife seems to have a different attitude, I remarked. Ex-wife, Roscoe corrected. I filed for divorce yesterday. That was news to me. Roscoe didn't talk about his plans, and I didn't press him, realizing that he needed time to make a decision. Are you sure? I asked cautiously. Absolutely, he nodded. After everything I've learned, I can't stay with her. It would be unfair to myself. Morris coughed. In that case, we need to coordinate our actions. The divorce proceedings and the libel suit could affect each other. We spent several hours discussing defense strategy, possible counterarguments, witnesses we could bring in. Morris was thorough and methodical, looking at every aspect of the case from every angle. The key is not to panic, he said as he was about to leave. We have a strong position. The truth is on our side. On Monday, the day before the preliminary hearing, Lynette showed up on our doorstep. She looked different, not as confident, not as perfect. Hair gathered into a simple ponytail, minimal makeup, plain clothes instead of the usual expensive outfits. I want to talk to Roscoe, she said when I opened the door. He's not home, I answered, which was true. Roscoe had gone to Aquapure to learn more about Vivian's technology and its applications. Then I'll wait. She made a movement to enter, but I didn't back down. I don't think that's a good idea, Lynette. Considering you're suing me, I wanted to talk about that too. Her voice sounded softer than usual. I made a mistake, Ewell. I acted impulsively, out of resentment. I'm willing to drop the suit if we can come to an agreement. What kind of settlement? I asked, already guessing the answer. I know that Roscoe has filed for divorce, she sighed, and I realize that my past actions look bad. But I do love him, and I want to make things right. What exactly are you suggesting, Lynette? Let's sit down and talk like adults. Discuss the terms of the trust, see if we can change some of the clauses. If we can agree, I'll drop the suit, and Roscoe might reconsider the divorce decree. So, it all came down to money again. Despite all the revelations, all the scandals, Lynette was still trying to get access to Vivian's inheritance. Come in. I finally backed off. But I can't speak for Roscoe. The decision to divorce is his alone. We sat down in the living room. Lynette looked around as if looking for a change since her last visit. The terms of the trust are not subject to change, Lynette, I said firmly. They were set up in accordance with Vivian's wishes? But you set up the trust after her death, she objected. How do you know what she would have wanted? I knew Vivian for 40 years. We weren't just husband and wife. We were partners, friends, like-minded. I know what she wanted for her invention, for her legacy, for her son. Lynette changed tactics. Ewell, I realize you never approved of me, and perhaps you had reason to be suspicious. But I've changed. That old man in Arizona, that was a long time ago, and I was young and stupid. And those social media posts were just stupid jokes between friends. I really fell in love with Roscoe as I got to know him better. I watched her, marveling at her acting skills. If I hadn't known the truth, if I hadn't seen evidence of her true nature, I might have believed her. She looked sincere, remorseful, vulnerable. Lynette, I said calmly, you are very good. I am. But you can't do that to me. I saw how you manipulated my son, how you spread lies about me all over town, how you threatened to destroy me. And now that your plan has failed, you come here with remorse and offers of compromise. You always saw the worst in me, a hint of resentment in her voice. Never given a chance to prove that I was worthy of your son. You proved it with your actions, Lynette. It's not my fault they showed your true nature. She stared at me for a few seconds, and I saw the mask of benevolence begin to slip. Okay, she finally said, straightening up. Since you don't want to be reasonable, let's talk straight. I have something on you, Ewell. Something that could change the course of the trial. You do? I raised an eyebrow. And what's that? I spoke to the doctor who treated you after Vivian died. Dr. Murphy. He told me that you were deeply depressed, taking strong antidepressants, even talking about suicidal thoughts. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dr. Murphy did treat me after Vivian's death, and I was indeed depressed. But I had never talked about suicide, and the medical records were confidential. Dr. Murphy would be breaking doctor-patient confidentiality if he told you something like that, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. You're bluffing. Maybe, she smiled, but in a court of law, it'll be word against word. And if I can find other witnesses to corroborate that you were emotionally unstable after your wife's death, well, that could call into question your ability to make financial decisions at the time you set up the trust. So that's what she was getting at. To undermine the legitimacy of the trust by claiming I was incapacitated when I created it. Do you really think that's going to work? I asked. After everything that's come out about you? It's worth a try, she shrugged. What do I have to lose? If I win, I have access to millions. If I lose, well, I've already lost Roscoe, my job, my reputation. It can't get any worse. In that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. Lynette was a smart, beautiful woman who could have accomplished a lot with integrity. Instead, she chose manipulation, deception, fraud, and in the end, she ended up with nothing. There's something else you don't know about trust, Lynette, I said after a pause. What's that? She leaned forward, intrigued. Even if you somehow miraculously convince the court that I was incapacitated when I set it up, it won't change anything, because I'm not the only founder. Vivian started the trust before she died. That was a truth I never revealed to anyone, not even Roscoe. In the last weeks of her life, Vivian worked with a lawyer, drafting the preliminary documents for the trust. She didn't have time to finalize the process, but her will was clearly expressed in those documents. And it was on the basis of them that I created the final version of the trust after her death. I don't believe you, Lynette said, but the uncertainty in her voice gave her away. Morris keeps all the documents, including drafts drawn up by Vivian and her lawyer. They'll be produced in court, if necessary. Lynette looked shocked. This last trump card, which she hadn't expected, shattered her last hope. At that moment, we heard the sound of a car pulling up. Roscoe had returned. Lynette tensed, clearly preparing for her new role as a remorseful wife seeking forgiveness. The door opened, and Roscoe entered, stopping in the living room doorway when he saw Lynette. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cold. "I came to talk to you," she answered, and I noticed the instantaneous change in her posture, her expression, the tone of her voice. From the hard, calculating woman who just threatened me, she changed to a fragile, vulnerable one. "There's nothing to discuss, Lynette." Roscoe put the car keys on the table by the door. "You sued my father. You tried to smear him in the eyes of the whole town. You lied to me from the beginning of our relationship. I made mistakes. She stood up, taking a step toward him. I admit that, but I do love you, Roscoe, and I'm ready to make things right. How? He crossed his arms over his chest. How can you undo everything you've done? I'll drop the lawsuit, she said quickly. I'll publicly apologize to your father, to the whole town. I'll do whatever it takes to prove I've changed. Roscoe stared at her for a long moment, and I was troubled to see the shadow of doubt in his eyes. Despite everything he'd learned about her, a part of him was still attached to Lynette, still wanted to believe in the possibility of redemption. You're going to do all this for nothing? He asked skeptically. Without any conditions? Lynette hesitated, realizing that her next words could decide everything. All I want is for you to give us another chance, she said quietly. I want you to let me prove that I can be the wife you deserve. I could see Roscoe struggling with himself, saw a part of him want to believe her, want to get back what he thought they had. Roscoe, I couldn't keep quiet. Just now, before you got here, Lynette threatened me, said she'd find witnesses to prove I was incapacitated when the trust was created, that she'd undermine the legitimacy of all the documents. Roscoe turned to Lynette, his face changed. Is that true? Your father misunderstood, she said quickly. I was just talking about the possible legal strategies my lawyer suggested, but I rejected them. I came here in peace, Roscoe, to make things right. Stop lying. Roscoe suddenly bellowed, and I was struck by the force of his anger. For once in your life, tell the truth. Lynette backed away, shocked by his outburst, and then her mask finally came off. Okay, yes, I want the money. Money that rightfully belongs to you, Roscoe. Money we could use to build a beautiful life, but your father decided he knew best how to use it, that you didn't deserve control over your own inheritance. The terms of the trust were set in accordance with my mother's wishes, Roscoe replied calmly, and I agree with them. Money should serve a noble purpose, not just provide a lavish lifestyle. Noble purposes? Do you really believe that? Or are you just repeating your father's words like a good little boy? Go away, Lynette, Roscoe said quietly but firmly. I have filed for divorce and I will not change my mind. Our marriage was a mistake from the beginning. You'll regret it, she grabbed her bag. You'll both regret it. I'm not dropping the suit. I'll find a way to prove the trust is illegal. And when I get that money, and I will, believe me, you'll be biting your elbows for rejecting my peace offering. She stalked out of the house, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. Were you really willing to give her another chance? I asked Roscoe. No, I knew who she was. I knew what she wanted. I just wanted to hear it from her, without masks or pretense. On the day of the trial, all of Lompoc seemed to gather at the county courthouse. The story had gotten so much publicity that even people from neighboring towns came to see the proceedings. Morris was as calm and confident as ever. We had all the documents, the testimony, the evidence. Lynette's lawyer, a young ambitious fellow named Gregory Thompson, looked less confident, consulting his notes frequently, nervously adjusting his tie. The trial was short and unambiguous. The judge, an older man with shrewd eyes, listened attentively to both sides, studied the documents, and made a decision. Lynette's claim is dismissed as unfounded. She is ordered to pay court costs and attorney's fees on my part. Moreover, the judge added, I recommend that the district attorney consider filing perjury and attempted fraud charges based on the record before this court. Lynette sat as pale and motionless as a statue. When the judge concluded the hearing, she stood up and walked quickly out of the courtroom without looking at anyone. Her lawyer hurried after her, clearly upset with the outcome of the case. What now? Roscoe asked as we left the courthouse. Now we move on, I replied. You finalize the divorce, continue to study Mom's work, maybe start your own business related to her technology. And you, I wondered. The last few months had been so filled with conflict, with struggle, that I rarely thought about what came after. I don't know, I answered honestly. Travel, perhaps. I always wanted to see the world, but your mom didn't like long trips. Or maybe I'll write a book about Vivian, about her work. Let people know how amazing she was. Despite our victory, I felt a strange emptiness. Lynette had been exposed, the trust protected, her reputation restored, but at what cost? My son had seen his marriage, albeit one based on lies, crumble. I was forced to reveal Vivian's last secrets. And though we won the battle, the war left scars. A week after the trial, Roscoe moved out of my house. He found a small apartment in Lompoc, not far from the Aquapure office, where he began working as a consultant. He came over for dinner every Sunday, but I could see a certain detachment in his eyes. Perhaps a part of him still loved Lynette. Or maybe he couldn't fully forgive me for keeping the truth about his mother's inheritance from him all these years. I was alone in the big house, holding memories of Vivian, of our life together, of little Roscoe running through the hallways. Sometimes the loneliness seemed unbearable, but I had a sense of moral victory, the knowledge that I had kept my promise to Vivian. I had protected her legacy and our son from those who saw them only as a source of money. And I had plans. A new life that I would start on my own terms. A book about Vivian, traveling to places where her technology was helping people. Perhaps a foundation in her name that would support young scientists, especially women, in their research. Life goes on, even when it feels like the world is crumbling around you. And sometimes through the ruins of the old sprout the seeds of something new, unexpected, perhaps even better.